Hey, what's up, guys? So we're back with more content. If you're new to the channel, welcome. Sorry, guys, my tongue got twisted there. So recently, I actually watched a video by the Templin Institute, and this one is another video by Templin Institute. So shout out and credit goes to them for this video, and I got a lot of good feedback on it. So I went back to my roots a little bit and checked out a Halo content video, which is called the Human Covenant War. And a lot of people were so happy, like, hey, this is like the OG content, because Halo was actually some of the very first content I saw that I have on the channel, like the lore. I checked out all the game cutscenes, and then I ended up playing the games themselves and everything. So Halo is really like basically the foundation of my channel, and now I'm gonna be checking out another video, and it's called The Flood. Now, fighting against the Flood in the Halo games was really tough. They came at you like zombies, and they're really tough, and it takes a lot of rounds just to put them down. So I have some idea about them, about the Flood, and I still remember even till this day, Halo, the Mona Lisa video, how that was. It was crazy. But either way, I'm really excited to learn more about the Flood. Maybe there's something I don't know, because I just got a basic idea of who they are, and the only way to destroy them is by using the Halo and wiping out all living biological creatures in the galaxy, so that way the Flood would starve and they would die out. But that's pretty much all I know. So without anything else, let's just jump into the video. His intros are cool, by the way.
No civilization that grows beneath a veil of stars can resist assigning some sort of meaning to them. When humanity first escaped the confines of Earth and began exploring the universe,
you know what? I'll keep the
brought with
captions
them,
on.
like so many others before, an earnest hope that some grand understanding or purpose might be found in the darkness. But the galaxy raised only more questions, the greatest of which came from the ruins of a species that would come to be known as the Forerunners. How a race of such sophistication and power could disappear in an instant, and the purpose of the mysterious relics they left behind would lead to war and carnage by those who followed them.
Yeah, I remember the Forerunners from Halo,
Worse than this
I think
question,
it was 4.
For it came in the form of the Flood.
Oh yeah, Captain Keyes.
Parasitic, invasive, and extraordinarily adaptable, the multitude of life forms and mutations that constitute the Flood have no equal in the natural world. They are an aberration within the study of biology and are incompatible with every natural ecosystem. Yet, despite their grotesque appearance and typically wild behavior, as an outbreak spreads, the Flood have the potential to become a self-aware and highly intelligent entity, matching or surpassing any civilization in galactic history. They are an almost
What is this
perfect
from? Like a
life
comic?
form, but one that can only persist through
Or
the
like an animation?
extermination of all others. In their most basic form, the Flood exists as a minuscule airborne particulate known as flood spores. Their only purpose is the infection of other forms of life through a unique Flood supercell. These supercells coordinate cellular assembly, but are also capable of acting in conjunction with one another, creating or mimicking any bodily organ as required, resulting in a kind of thinking muscle. When these spores are inhaled, come into contact with an open wound, or through some other method enter into a living or recently deceased organism, supercells are released and act as catalysts for a rapid transformation. The Flood spore hijacks the body and nervous system of an infected host, breaking down their cells into a raw organic material which can then be assimilated. As this process accelerates, more supercells are created, and an organism's
I remember
compounds
that.
are repurposed.
I watched that video.
Calcium, in particular, is used to create the framework of a new Flood life form, to
Oh,
which
calcium.
biomatter is then grafted. The host's brain is kept chemically isolated throughout the process, ensuring no signals can interrupt it.
Yeah, I still remember the scene from Combat Evolved, but yeah, the first time I ever fought the Flood, it was something else, because I thought the Covenant were tough, but the Flood, Covenant infected by the Flood is 10 times tougher. And I still remember the first time I saw the Flood, because it was not when I was playing the video games. It was when I was checking out the game cutscenes. and people were like telling me what they really were and everything, and I just kept on saying parasitic. But I still remember also another mission. I forgot which Halo it was, but there was like this huge Covenant ship that was like infected by the flood, and going through it was, in my opinion, pretty tough because I kept on getting killed by the flood, and some of them came at me like zombies. Some of them were shooting. Some of them were just took like a whole magazine just to take down. So they were a pretty formidable enemy.
Depending on the complexity of the life form, this intricate, multi-stage transformation can take only seconds. The earliest flood life forms created by their spores are generally grouped into a category of infection forms.
Yeah, so this is an animation, but I don't know what it's called. If you guys know what it's called, please put it down in the comments below.
Seeking out new life in which to spread flood supercells. Unlike the largely passive spores, these parasites actively seek out new hosts. They can take different forms, each uniquely suited to a different environment, but the most prevalent are pod infectors. These are far more effective than spores alone, and the primary vector of a flood infection.
Shotguns do amazing on them.
Size and resembling balloon-like creatures, pod infectors overwhelm larger and stronger organisms through sheer numbers. With numerous grasping tentacles, they can chip away at armor, clothing, and flesh before probing into the victim's nervous system, typically through the chest. Once flood supercells are released, the transformation repeats itself. Even brief contact with a pod infector can be fatal. Once a supercell has been released, there is no reliable means of slowing its progression. Only in exceedingly rare cases, when an infectopod has been wounded or significantly aged, has the host body survived the process, but is still only able to exert control over their own body during brief, random moments. Organisms successfully afflicted by pod infectors might be turned into pod infectors themselves, but often the infection will instead begin creating new forms of flood life.
Oh yeah,
Formerly sentient organisms might be turned into any number of combat forms, and tasked with further spreading and defending the flood infection. Rather than completely overwhelming the host, the parasitic growth lodges itself somewhere on the body, and begins growing new limbs and appendages which extrude outwards, seemingly randomly. Certain organs are preserved or recreated, allowing the body to remain functional. The overall physical appearance and behavior of these combat forms varies drastically, depending on the species originally infected. Eventually, flood supercells will completely overwhelm a combat form, and its usefulness in this role will be severely impaired. When this occurs, the parasite will begin spontaneously generating new pod infectors within the host body. This causes the organism to swell to grotesque proportions, with any appendages and limbs reduced.
Oh yeah,
to
some of them did blow up. I remember that.
These carrier forms act as mobile incubators, producing pod infectors indefinitely. When potential new hosts are present in its immediate vicinity, however, it will attempt to move towards them, before detonating itself in a biological explosion, similar to that of a fragmentation grenade.
Yeah, I remember that. There was like these big bloated ones, and if you shoot them, then they explode, and then there was those pod infectors coming out. Yeah, that explains a lot. But basically, when they like start infecting and start like transforming the individuals, yeah, I still remember that. And also, I do remember a few times where I killed like Singelis, and they like fell to the ground. There was like pod infectors that go onto them and basically reanimate them. Those were the ones that was always scary.
Clouds of flood spores are released, and the infection is allowed to spread further. As with infection forms, carrier forms can be very different in appearance and capability, depending on the local environment and native species present. During the earliest phase of a flood outbreak, when only small groups of individuals have been assimilated, infection,
looks like a brute.
Combat, and carrier forms will act in an animalistic and senseless manner. During
Oh yeah,
this
Halo
feral
Wars
stage,
2.
their overriding instinct will be to spread the infection, but without any strategy or higher-order thinking. Despite their rudimentary behavior, by some kind of instinct, even the most basic form of the flood will prioritize more intelligent species for assimilation. In one of the least understood aspects of their propagation, parasitic life forms can retain the intelligence and memories of their host. These are then shared across every flood organism, collectively forming a nascent hive intelligence, a critical component of the infection's development.
Oh, I don't think I knew about the hive intelligence part.
This single consciousness grows more sophisticated as the outbreak spreads. Combat forms will begin to reliably use weapons and tools with which they were familiar in life, and even begin to operate complex machinery.
That explains why they were
Infection
using
forms
rifles.
become able to coordinate their activities to rapidly acquire biomass from sentient life forms. At every level, flood life forms will exhibit a greater ability to solve problems and react to outside interference. At an indeterminate moment, this consciousness will reach a tipping point, and the flood will begin to enter into a new, coordinated stage. From enormous amounts of raw biomass, a physical embodiment of the supreme flood intelligence is crafted, a Gravemind.
All right, the Gravemind.
The Gravemind is the highest stage of the flood's biological development, directing the outbreak as a whole to perform intricate tasks and enact complex strategic thinking.
I think that was Halo
Through the
2.
absorption of countless memories, it will possess an extraordinary awareness of entire species and attempt to manipulate or deceive them in subtle or overt ways. To coordinate its growing capabilities, a Gravemind will begin producing key minds, specialized forms that amplify the effectiveness of the shared consciousness. The most common key mind is known colloquially as abominations and drastically improves the abilities of nearby flood organisms. The Gravemind will additionally attempt to replicate itself, creating additional proto-Graveminds. These have the potential to grow into fully formed Graveminds themselves, but no matter how many there are, they are merely representations of a single shared intelligence. The capability and capacity of that intelligence will depend heavily on how many key minds it controls. Once a Gravemind has asserted itself over the flood, and the coordinated stage of the outbreak is well underway, a new evolution will occur. The most advanced
interesting.
category of flood creations, beneath only the key minds, are designated pure forms. Unlike every other flood organism, these are not created through the infection of alien hosts, but rather crafted from raw biomass. Without the restrictions of a host's body, these can take any number of subforms, usually adapting to directly counter threats to the greater outbreak. In the feral stage, and even during the subsequent coordinated stage, a flood outbreak might be misidentified as a natural phenomenon or a mindless rampaging infection. A Gravemind might even actively work to encourage this perception.
So that way it could
The flood's
spread.
character becomes truly evident when it acquires the ability to conduct interstellar travel. This capability is based on the kind of civilization the flood has infected, and is not a component of its innate biological development. Nevertheless, by commandeering spacecraft, the flood can enter an interstellar stage.
Yeah, this is the
infecting
mission I was talking
entire
about, the
worlds and
infected
star
Covenant ship.
systems. One of its most notable abilities at this stage is the Logic Plague, an abstract flood infection carried not through biological means, but rather by transmitted data and artificial intelligences. Through this
That's
still
cool.
largely mysterious process, the flood can begin to directly operate technology, often to a superior degree when compared to its original operators, thanks to the Gravemind's immense base of knowledge. The earliest information on the flood comes from the Forerunners, which hint that they are all that remains
the
of an
terminals.
even more ancient civilization. What is undeniable is that the Forerunners fought an apocalyptic war against the flood, in which the power of the hive mind grew exponentially. Entire worlds were transformed into key minds, and the resulting Logic Plague infected every Forerunner system and network. With every other method of containing the flood ineffective, the Forerunners resorted to a brilliant, yet completely Pyrrhic solution. Rather than attempt to destroy the flood themselves, the Forerunners rid the galaxy of their food source, stripping them of any future hosts and their ability to spread.
So they used the Halo.
Through the activation of 7 ring-shaped megastructures referred to as the Halo Array, the galaxy was purged of all sentient life. The Forerunners themselves were erased from existence, their last survivors fleeing the galaxy to seek refuge elsewhere.
Yeah, so I remember the purpose of the Halo rings being mentioned in Halo Combat Evolved. I forgot that little floating drone, and I remember how I think it was Master Chief that was in the control room, and it was like being discussed. Basically, that is the Halo's function. Basically, wiping out every single biological sentient life in the universe, so that way the flood would starve, and they would not reach like the next galaxy or things like that.
Pre-sapient life, carefully conserved on a massive ark, was introduced to their native environments, now free from the threat of infection. The war fought between the United Nations Space Command and the theocratic alliance known as the Covenant unleashed the threat of the Flood millennia after their supposed extinction. Specimens had been preserved through certain Forerunner installations, and the resulting infection grew to substantial size, even forming a Gravemind, before it was eventually destroyed. But while the Gestalt consciousness is gone, sporadic Flood lifeforms remain, locked away in the forgotten corners of the fallen Forerunner civilization. A single spore can devastate an entire civilization, and with the Covenant shattered and the UNSC in chaos, there has never been a better opportunity for an outbreak to go unnoticed. A timeless chorus may yet arise again, one that joins every voice of the galaxy together to sing victory everlasting. A universe of corpses sharing one grave.
Yeah, but it'll come down to whether they have to use the Halo ring or not. Alright, another great video by the Templin Institute, and talks about the Flood. I say the only new thing that I think I learned, maybe this was something I knew, but either way I did forget, was the collective hive mind. So basically every single being they absorb, they also absorb their minds, and it turns into a collective hive mind. The first time I saw the Gravemind in Halo 2, I was literally in shock. I was like, what the hell is that thing? I didn't know it had anything to do with the Flood until you guys mentioned it in the cutscenes video. So I was like, what is that? By the way, really great video by the Flood, and there's another video I have saved by the Templin Institute, and it will talk more about the Covenant. But either way, the Flood is very terrifying, and it was one enemy I had a hard time in the games. And I don't know, I mean, and they are, terrifying and very difficult to kill. That's like the only way I can describe them. If you guys had a difficult time against the Flood in the games as well, please put it down in the comments below so at least I know I wasn't the only one struggling. But anyways, that's all I got for today, guys. So thank you guys for tuning in. Thank you guys for watching. Hit that notification bell so you know when I drop another video. And also shout out to all my members, subscribers, viewers. You guys are amazing. Thank you so much for your support, guys. I really do appreciate it. So without anything else, I'll see you guys next time.